To everybody, this is an In Conversation panel. Jane Sleeker is our host. For those of you who weren't in the previous session or joined us late today, Jane is a social worker and psychology graduate who has worked in the field of adoption support for the last 15 years across various organisations and roles, assisting those who've been affected by Australia's forced adoption era, as well as more recent domestic adoption practices and inter-country adoption. Jane has written for and edited post-adoption newsletters, co-hosted a podcast, and contributed to an anthology of adoptee stories called The Flourish Experience. Our guest panelists joining us together are Susannah Macfarlane, who is a book publisher and writer who has written over 70 books for kids and a few for grown-ups. She worked in publishing in both Australia and the UK, where both her children were born. Susannah now works part-time as Head of Publishing for the Bible Society Australia and spends the rest of her time writing or putting off writing. She lives in Melbourne. And she's joined by Robin Luber. Robin was born in 1942, grew up in Western Australia and has now lived in Melbourne since 1973. Formerly an English teacher, now happily retired, she has 4 daughters and 7 grandchildren. They have written the book Heartlines, The Year I Met My Other Mother Together. I love this book. This was such a fascinating read because you got to see both sides of the journey. And I know that Jane will have some great questions. This will be a really interesting discussion. And yeah, thank you both for joining us. We've only got a snippet of your face, Susannah. So if you want to sit closer to Robin, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. We're completely in the frame where we see us.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yep, that's better. Thank you so much. I will hand over to you, Jane. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for introducing Susannah and Robin, because now I don't have to do so. But yeah, I just want to echo, I really love this book as well, because I've got a background. I read it many years ago, probably not long after you published it, and I've reread it recently and definitely got probably more out of it the second time. So it was actually not too long after reuniting. So you both reunited in, was it 2014? Have I got that right? Yep. And this book was published, Heartlines, The Year I Met My Other Mother, in 2016. And I have to say, I don't know of any other book, I could be wrong, but I don't know of any other book that an adoptee and their birth mother have co-written together. So I feel like that's pretty unique. And I know that in the book, Susannah, you describe the fact that you thought of this idea of writing a book together and put that to Robin. And one of your reasons that you articulated was hoping that this could help other people that are going through this experience. But I guess I'm wondering, you know, if there were any other unintended consequences or any other things that came out of this project together, and also anything else that was in your mind when you came up with this idea as well. You're on mute. Hold on.
There you go. I've unmuted myself. Sorry, Jane. I mean, the main reason was, could telling our experience help other people who are trying to navigate? And what happened very early, I should point out that this writing is not our journal writing. That was an emotional hot mess of a thing, and that would have been a terrible thing to inflict upon the world. So it was, but this idea of a two-hander where people could actually see the reality and the mess of it. But I suppose, as you'd know, when you write, often the themes evolve as you write. And I don't think we expected, or I certainly didn't, that we were writing a book about forgiveness. But ultimately, that's the arc that rides over the whole book. So I think there is a bit of alchemy in writing, and you know, as you're doing it and putting things together. And also, it was fun. I mean, it was kind of a respite from the reunion in some ways. Yeah.
Interesting. What about you, Robin? Like, you're nodding in agreement.
Yes.
What was that process like for you?
Well, I felt the same way, actually, that
Okay.
when Susanna first suggested that we write together, my first reaction was, oh, what, you're the writer, I'm not, oh, I don't know about this. But then I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed the whole project of writing together. And I think it was that thing of a respite from all the intensity of the personal emotions. Suddenly you've got external task and you have to use intellectual decisions, which words will most represent the truth, and come to those artistic decisions. And that was a whole different role, a different way of bonding. Like, instead of just mother and daughter, we were sort of professional workers together, and that was, in fact, I laugh saying that because I took it a step further. I sort of really amused myself deciding to play act. I was the writer, this important writer, and it was just having fun. And so, working long hours and lots of cups of coffee, and haven't got time to wash my greasy hair, and crumpled paper on the floor, and that whole, I just hammed it up, but it was really amusing.
It was it's funny when she says working long hours, because I mean Robin is her age and not quite the same energy levels. And one morning I think she was in the writer, had entered the room, and yes, I'm going to, I just need some food, and then I'm going to do it all afternoon, power through. And so I got her some food, and then I was just starting on the computer, and I turned around and she's fast asleep. So and she just said, I'm so sorry, I can't do it. So there was a little bit of, but it was a tag team in many ways. But no, so it was definitely fun as well.
Yes, giving that bit of distance to the emotions. It was sort of clarifying and settling. And I think that's what art's meant to do a bit to life, is it puts an order on it. You have to look at it from a bit of a distance, and also, and just another byproduct, I met a lot of lovely people that people contact because of the book. And one.
Hold on 1 second.
We've just got someone beaming in.
Yes, please continue.
Yeah, that's right.
You met lots of interesting people.
Just contact. And one birth mother, Barbara, who's here today, we've become friends. Like, we still see each other. She drops in, every few months or something, and it's just really great that relationship and others, came out of it. So yeah, it was lots of good things.
And I'm wondering about the process. Like, did you generally sit down together in the same space when you wrote, or did you ever write separately? How did that work?
A bit of both. We had the structure, so we knew it was going to be a two-hander. So it was, and then we knew, so for those who haven't read it, it starts in 1965, unsurprisingly, when I was born. It then shoots forward to 1983, which was the first when Robin reached out to me, but the reunion. 89. Oh, 89. One of those years in the 80s. The 80s were fun. And then it goes forward to 2014. So there were the three components of it. So we knew we had that. And so we'd plan together, but sometimes we'd write separately. And I was the sort of compiler, the sort of editor that put it in. And that would, that led to some interesting experiences, because, you're reading about your life. And in some of it, I was reading about Robin's life for the first time. The book prompted to talk about things which hadn't really been covered or hadn't been covered in depth. And that was both good and hard in depending on, and required some, as Robin said earlier, it required some distancing, which was beneficial. I think there was I talked about that one weird time where Mum was a bit tired again, and she just said, oh, will you just scaffold out that bit? And that bit was the bit when she and my birth father went to the doctor to explore options. Now, that's a weird thing for me to have to write.
I can't believe I asked it of her now, but
yeah, it was sort of like, that was and that did my head in a little bit, because, then as a writer, I'm trying to think, well, how did she feel? And then I did think,
I did write it.
She did, then she carried on, but
you helped us start.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that makes this book even more unique is the fact that you include a lot of your correspondence in email form, messages back and forth from each other, and then you unpack how you felt and reactions that you had. So I'm wondering what that was like to not only revisit the correspondence, but to hear each other's inner thoughts in response to what was happening at the time.
Yeah, that was also great and hard. The reason why we did it was because it's real. So we'd put the thing in a structure, and we'd written vignettes, and we'd given it a shape. And obviously what we write is true, but this was real and raw. And we thought that's, if it's going to be helpful, it has to be real, and people have to see that it's real. And in the correspondence, which we edited, but only for length, we didn't change the copy because that would have been not right. You see the mess we make of things, and that's, I think, the power of it, because we're not trying to go, aren't we terrific, we managed, because it's quite clear we're not terrific. In fact, no one wants to read a book about people being terrific. They want to read a book about people in real struggle, and how they attempt to get out of it.
Yes. So it was challenging to read, oh, this is what she really thinks.
Yep.
But it was educational, you know. But the whole thing too of even trying to communicate sort of sensitive emotional issues by text is sort of difficult at the best of times. And, you know, there's so much potential for misunderstanding, misinterpretation. And, you know, especially when you're both on high alert for what tone is that meant to be in, because texts don't express tone. And so became quite frustrating, and I have to say draining, especially even for me. The technical thing, you know, texting was not such a thing. I'm very slow at it, and you know, you'd be tired and you'd be getting back, and then a response would come back, and no, but I didn't really mean that, but you didn't hear the way I. So it was fraught with tension.
And if you if the whole point of how we navigate emotional deep water is to try to imagine how it is for the other person, then this is the ultimate exercise. Because, you know, when in the moment we're just sitting there sending these texts, sometimes not particularly mindfully, sometimes, you know, trying to craft something, but often in the moment of emotion.
Firing off your own.
So then to hear how the other person is, it's like, oh, okay, I'm an emotional hot mess, but the other person's not doing too well either. And I think that's when good things can happen, when we realize our grip on the truth, you know. It may be how we're feeling, but it's not necessarily the truth. And I think that's what's exposed by showing that correspondence. Oh, there's someone with a small machine gun.
Yes.
Also, the thing of just having different upbringings, you're used to communicate, you have your language that you're used to and way of expressing things. Like the Susanna's family was much more physically overt in affection, and mine wasn't. So that was a huge adjustment, because we'd just come out of what we thought was normal, and the other one's like, oh, this is, you know, this is not me, this is weird. So that was another thing.
There's no shorthand. I mean, when you're in relationship with anyone, you develop shorthand, and we didn't have any of that, but yet we were trying to navigate the rockiest of terrains without some of the. So it was hard. But there's one section called
X marks the spot.
No, yeah, a chapter, a little vignette called X marks the spot, in the running aground section, which is when it all goes pear-shaped and it's very perilous. And so Robin would be sending that through to me, and I must admit I found it really hard. Like, even reading it again last night almost re-triggered me, you know. It sort of takes you back to just how intense it was. And this is at the moment when I actually thought, I can't do this anymore. This is really hard. This is too hard. I can't do it. It's jackknifed my whole life. I'm becoming a nutter. I can't have I think if anything is about the book is true, is not just that I completely become a nutter, but that seems to be totally characteristic of the adoptees reunion experience. And you're not, if you're not feeling you're a nutter, you're probably not doing it properly.
And I have to say, maybe not just the adoptees reunion experience, but the adoptees life. I can attest to that. I really love that there's actually a chapter called Susanna's Inner Child Goes Nuts. Because when I read that chapter, and it's a lot of exchanges back and forwards, and I could really relate to what you were feeling as I was reading it, and thinking of times in my life when I have gone completely nuts and there have been not very good consequences that, you know, things that have happened that have not been good for me or my life. So I think that's really real, but I think that's what makes it so powerful. And then sharing that, so normalizing. But
Because I don't think I even realized I had an inner child particularly until all this happened. And of course it's the inner child that was wounded. So the adult walking around has varying degrees of emotional awareness that they're, you know, limping with this emotional child. So when Robin came back in and I let her in, it was, you know, as I think I say in the book, it's like ripping a lid off one of those pressurized tennis ball cans. There's this stuff just gets let out, and the little inner child wants their moment. And it's like, don't let the pigeon drive the bus, don't let the 2-year-old drive the bus, you know.
And then you can see the difficulties too then for the birth mother, who I knew so little about adoption really, and you know, this idea of realizing what a terrible primal wound it is that came only in the process of the reunion. I had none of that. It was really ignorant of it. So that, but so that I'm getting back this baby, and it's hard, you know, to cope with that sort of demands. And at times I just felt I can't do this. The supply of comfort and reassurance just isn't up to the demand, you know. So just
also when books are important, because it wasn't until I read some books about it, because I thought I'm in real trouble here, like what is going on. And so that's the power of books and the power of people sharing their stories, which is again one of the reasons we wanted to do it, because it's in that we can go, oh, okay, for a start, if I am abnormal, there's a lot of other people who are, and clever people have gone through and stepped it through and gone, this is why you feel this way. You know, there's a reason for it. And if you know that, it's slightly more tethering, which I think is the goal.
You know, you're not crazy, that it's actually.
Yes. Or if you are, that's part of the journey, you know, that's part of the process.
Yeah.
I've heard it described as it's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation.
Yes.
And it's an abnormal situation.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And speaking of books, there is a book, you know, I've read in the last couple of years as well, that really came to mind when I was rereading your book, and that, not to promote another book in your book talk, but
go for it.
It's really great, and it's by an adoptee who's also a therapist, called 10 Foundations for a Meaningful Life, No Matter What's Happened. And she talks a lot about, you know, attachment theory, but about any relationship, it's about call and response. When you put a call out, which I really saw coming through in the correspondence in the book that you share, of seeking reassurance from Robin. And Robin, even despite how she may have felt, overall, she really is responsive. She responds again and again, like a mother would to a baby. And so I think it's not surprising that you were able to hang in there, because you're making yourself vulnerable. Robin's, you know, responding, and a bond forms. And I really, that doesn't always happen. It really doesn't happen.
And that's because vulnerability is scary, isn't it? And if you do it and the other person doesn't, you go, oops, won't be doing that again. And you sort of run away. It's funny you say that about the call and response, Jen. It happened in the book, and it was a song, a piece of music, which is beautiful, called I Giorni in the Morning by Ludovico Einaudi, and it was absolutely summed up. And it I was driving back from something, and it was playing on ABC Classics or something, which I don't even normally listen to. And it's basically a call and response. And for me, it summed up. There was this lighter and then heavier. And to me, it was like a mother and child kind of, you know, ebbing and flowing, because that's exactly what it is.
Is that the piece you actually share in the book?
Yes.
At one point you ask Robin to listen to that.
I did subject her to many things. I subjected her to an ABBA song, because I feel that there's an ABBA song for every part of your life. And who would have thought there'd be one for adoption reunion? But there is. And I made her listen to it, but of course she couldn't hear it, and then she flicked the app away, and you know, it all went pear-shaped. It was bizarre. I sent her the words later.
I actually wanted to talk about that song, but when in our discussion before today, I didn't make the cut, but I think now that you've brought it up, I loved that because when I was reading the book and you mentioned the song, which is I think the name of the game.
Yes. Yeah.
I put it on and listened to the song.
Oh,
And I just could feel it. And I'm like, this is it.
I'm going to Google it now. The lyrics are absolutely sum up an adoption reunion, which is why. So I saw Robin one day and then I saw her 3 days later. So the beginning of the name of the game, can I subject the audience to this? Is I've seen you twice in a short time, only a week since we started. It seems to me 4 every time. I think everyone's pleased I'm not singing. I'm getting more open-hearted. I was an impossible case. No one ever could reach me, but I think I could see in your face there's a lot you can teach me. But then it says, what's the name of the game? Does it mean anything to you? And you make me talk, you make me feel, and you make me show. If I trust in you, would you let me down? Would you laugh at me if I said I care for you? Could you feel the same way too? Who knew that those clever Swedes were writing an adoption reunion anthem?
I agree. But I think like what I picked up reading that section of the book is actually when you were listening to that song and maybe the other song you mentioned as well, the music. Music can be a pathway into actually feeling it.
Yeah.
And that you really let yourself go there. Like you went to the vulnerable place and that is so risky and takes so much courage and it paid off. It doesn't always. So that's really I think speaks to both of your courage in hanging in there. And I think that's captured in a section of the book that I've invited you to read, but just acknowledging you said this is actually triggering. But I think that speaks to how powerful this part of the book is, where you kind of reconcile with that vulnerability and what to do with it, really.
So I'll read it because I'm basically obedient, Jane. I have to say, when I read it earlier this morning, I did some emotion. It's amazing how this still, I mean, for anyone in this weird adoption world we find ourselves in, it's weird how it can still be emotion. Anyway, I'll try to have my big girl pants on and read it for you.
Do you want me to read it, or are you
happy? No, I think it's good to read, but okay. So it's from towards the end of the book and it's under the bit searching for stillness. That's the So just to give you context, we've had an enormous argument over the phone and text, and it's gone totally pear-shaped. And it's bad. It's really bad. So this is me. Following the last phone call with Robin, I am once again all at sea and at a loss to know what to do with my relationship with her. I desperately need to get a grip on something, ideally me. So once again, I hit the meditation cushion. More often than not, a good thought, albeit one I'm not supposed to be having, comes to me on the cushion, and so it is now. There I am trying to focus on my breath as thoughts tumble across in front of it. I replay the argument with Robin. I wonder what I'm going to cook for dinner. I plot a plan to simply withdraw from Robin. I wonder how many people manage to meditate for hours, and every now and then I notice that I'm breathing. Terrible meditator, as you can see. I realise that these thoughts to cut and run from Robin are not me formulating a proper response. They are a reaction fuelled in no small part by my little friend, my inner child. I see for the first time that my urge to run away, my hurt and hide routine, is little me protecting big me, but also punishing Robin. It's a sulk, but it's also a test. Would she come looking for me, or would she reject me again? This is a reasonable fear given her form, but it's a childish reaction and I need a grown-up response. So what is that response going to be? Am I really going to cut and run? Am I going to call Robin and tell her that it's all too hard and it's not working? I can tell her that and go back to my life, which actually had been great. Finishing with Robin would give me certainty, but it wouldn't give me peace. And anyway, who am I kidding? I've been acting like I have a choice in this. Yet now as I sit, not meditating on my meditation cushion, I see quite clearly that I don't. Because I realise that every time I think it's all too much, another thing, something more felt than thought, stops me. This woman, for all the differences between us and the misunderstandings we have, gets me. While there's a whole lot of stuff about me that she doesn't know yet, she fundamentally sees me, and she can, when she wants to, make me feel unbeatable. Just like, and it's only ever happened once before, Mum. And that is the simple reality. I wasn't looking for another mother, but now I have one anyway. It just is. That's a really special thing. Amazing, actually. Lightning doesn't often strike twice, so you don't give it up easily. It's worth fighting for, even if you're fighting yourself.
So powerful. I feel teary just hearing that. I can't imagine. And I think as well, when you read the book and you know the point that you started from, Susanna, when, you know, back in 1989, you sort of, Robin attempted contact, you responded in letter form, but not wishing for ongoing contact. And then I think Robin considered reaching out again, but ultimately you made the next contact in, whether it was 2014, around that time, with the intention of just, I'm going to write another letter, just a better, kinder letter, but I'm not opening this up. So to go from that to this is a very dramatic shift. And also acknowledging, I think a lot of adoptees, I think that's a real theme I've seen over the years, is that a lot of adoptees do not search until their adoptive mother passes away because of, and they talked about it in the last panel, like the sense of loyalty and that adoption narrative. And I think society kind of sets the scene that you can only have one mother, you can only have one father, when it's actually not correct. Mothers can have more than one child. Children can have more than one set of grandparents. There's actually no reason that can't be, but but
that's a lot of the wrestle, isn't it? And that, for me, that was a huge part of the wrestle. I was scared to lose mum, and that any sort of and that's sort of misplaced guilt and unfair on the adoptee who's had nothing to do with the whole process. But no, I think, as you say, it's common. And for me, it was only after I lost mum that it was even possible for those thoughts. But even then, it was still, your heart feels disloyal. So a lot of the tussle is about, which is, again, that being open-hearted, isn't it? And more is actually more.
For me, that was one of the key themes of the book, was there's more than enough love. Like, it's this weird construct that it can be, I'm sure, very threatening for the adoptive family. But actually, there's no reason. Actually, when you open your heart, there might actually be more for everyone. Not less. And, you know, the other thing in that bit that you just read, I mean, I'm wondering if that was the moment for you that you did decide, like, I am in this, you know, I'm not walking away from this, or if there have been other times, or when you both reach that point, because I think that reunions do go really pear-shaped. So but I think when we first spoke, we acknowledged that you do get to some point, probably after many years, and I feel like I'm at that point too, of I know it's not going to end, which is very comforting, or very reassuring, that you can have a fight and you know the relationship's not going to end. So I'm wondering, both of you, how you got to that point, and, you know.
Well, I think I got to that point earlier than Suzanne. I remember we were having in a restaurant at the Botanical Gardens, and I remember thinking, I felt vulnerable. Is she going to leave? Because, you know, there had been times and she'd vanish and come back. And we've always sort of thought that she's more a feeling person, I'm more a head fact person or something. But I remember saying, who is actually in a safer position is the one who feels they will never leave, more likely to stay, or the one who has decided they will never leave. And I had decided quite a long time for that I was not going anywhere.
That was 2 days after we met.
Well, I did. I decided this was the thing, and I was going to do it. So, that's.
Wow. So that's really interesting. That was very much a conscious decision. It was
very much, yes.
Whereas I think for me, I mean, I think Robin was right in perceiving that. But was it going to be safe for me to do that? So I think a lot of it, because particularly with the inner child, it's like, if I do this, am I safe?
Yeah.
And it has to be about emotional safety. And I didn't, as you pointed out, I thought I was just writing a letter. So I found myself in this thing, very quickly and quite sort of unexpectedly in the sort of deep emotional water.
Yeah, wow. And what was it for you that you decided, whether consciously or unconsciously, it's safe enough? Or was that a gradual process, do you think?
I think it was gradual, and the reality of it just comes in, and you go, this is my reality. I do have two mothers. I do have two families. It's weird, but it's my weird, and it's true. And I didn't do anything wrong. This is just how it is for me, and because I think being, older in 1965, it was all closed. It was all secret. The whole system conspired to say this never happened. This is not a thing. This baby comes to you mint, which of course they don't. And we'll never talk about this. This never happened. So approaching reunion when that was how it was all laid out for you is like opening. Am I allowed to open this? So it's tricky to navigate. And that's why Maddie, who's the social worker that was allocated to me, was invaluable, because she was basically giving permission and acknowledging this is what it is, and this is normal.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, because obviously you had a social worker involved in both the first attempt at contact and the second, but you in the book speak very highly of Maddie, who actually came to your first reunion. At least for a portion of it.
Yeah.
So,
before we sacked her
and ran off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what were the helpful parts of that? Because I don't think in the book we hear much about Maddie after that first reunion, but I think you allude to the fact that she was actually involved for a while.
She's just a very calm, supportive voice who'd seen some stuff, who'd seen some of this before, who knew a little bit what was coming. And she was allocated to me. And so she was very much, and so I, particularly in the early stages, she was invaluable, and she would just listen to me speaking rubbish, really, but help me sift through it and sort of sort it but reassure me that what I was feeling was normal.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly powerful. That if you're saying stuff and you go, yeah, actually this is we've seen this before, this is normal, which is, I think, again, why I believe so much in the power of story, and because it gives permission for people to go, this is okay, you're going to be okay. So it's like in a storm, you have one person who's a bit like, for those of you who know the Bible, like Jesus in the storm, he's just totally fine. That Maddie was that person who was just calm, because she wasn't emotionally invested in it. She had the benefit of objectivity and distance, and she could just be this really wise, lovely,
gentle,
kind of support.
Compassionate.
Yeah.
What about for you, Robin? Were there times that you felt you needed support in that process, or were you you said you'd made that decision pretty early on, I'm just going to hang in there. So what kind of helped you as those waves were rolling through?
Well, I didn't have half as much contact with Maddie. It was only when Susanna appeared to have vanished, and I thought, oh, this is not looking good. What on earth's going on? She really has gone somewhere this time. That's about the only time I rang Maddie and said, do you know where Susanna is, basically? And again, very gentle, no direct sort of advice or do this, but just you could feel her steering you, saying, no, I think it'll be all right. So she confirmed there was a problem. Yes, but she sort of comforted at the same time that she thought it would be all right, we'd get through it. And the message I got was, for me, just give her time and don't rush in. So, yeah. But apart from that, God was my go-to for all my problems, basically. I could let it all out there.
Yeah. And I felt, both of you were just so courageous through this whole process. And one of the other things that comes up in the book that sort of rocks things a bit is when Susanna asks you, Robin, to say, to tell her the story of what
Yeah.
happened at the time of her birth. And interestingly, the timing of your reunion, it really was right after that sort of forced adoption apology. So even though a lot of us will say, oh, there wasn't enough media coverage, no one knows about forced adoption, actually Susanna was tapping into things like Love Child and was hearing, you know, that stuff and assuming that this was her story.
Yes.
And you share that, no, actually, at least at that moment in time, you felt, no, I did have a choice and I did, you know, and that I imagine was scary to share.
Absolutely. I mean, that was quite a terrifying thing, that I knew she had the wrong narrative, because I did choose. I said, you know, I was selfish, self-centered. I had my life the way I wanted to go. I was sort of rather sealed off emotionally. And of course, everyone went along with it, and, you know, there wasn't many options offered, but I really can't blame in the way other people said that was just done to me. So absolutely. So I knew that I had to correct that narrative. Again, becoming a Christian, which was, you know, that was only when after I became a Christian that I actually dared to bring up this. I had hidden it as a deep, dark secret. I normally don't keep secrets, but this whole thing, I'd had a baby and given it away, was really buried. And it was only after I'd been a Christian a while that, because God, I've learned about him, he does not like secrets and lies. He likes things in the light. And I got this incredible prompting, no, it's time to bring this thing up. And that's why I tried to make contact. But then following on, he didn't want a secret or lie about this. I couldn't be built, our relationship couldn't be built on a false thing, on a deception, really. I think that's just not a good foundation. And no matter how scary, and it was scary to have to say, no, I chose to go along with it and give you away. But I think if it's not on that right foundation of truth, at any time, it's a weak foundation and the future can collapse, because who knows what will come out, and then you've been lied to. And so it was just that feeling that the truth is difficult, but it really is necessary. It's the only choice you can make. So I did it, and she walked away, and then she came back. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a terrible moment because the fairy tale I'd been told just got blasted out. And I should say, I don't know what else you would tell a young child. Like, I don't hold anyone or mum and dad, you know, your birth mother loved you very much, but she couldn't keep you, and now we have you. I don't know what else you would tell small child. So it's not that, but that was the story that I lived with. And as you say, it was in the air at that time about mothers having to give up and being terribly upset. So when she told me, it was like a total gut punch.
Yeah.
And as you know, as we write, I got up and I walked out.
Yes.
And because I just didn't know how to, it's just like your whole 50 years of a myth just got exploded.
Absolutely. And how did you, how do I put this?
Come back from it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
And this is the weirdness of humans, right? The two factors would be forgetfulness and manners. Because so I get out and I walk out of her garden, out of her house, I walk away. And I think, okay, well, this is it. I'm not doing that. And then I have to go back because I've forgotten my handbag with my car keys. And she's an elderly woman and she's made me lunch, and it would be rude. So I think, okay, I'll go back. I'll get my handbag. I'll get my keys. We'll have lunch. You know, I can do an hour, and then I'll go, and then that'll be it. But you know, I did walk back in, and you know, I think Robin said something which I still remember. Said, I didn't want you then, but I do want you now. So it was that immediate, you know, and then I thought, okay, well, I'm still just staying for lunch. And then she kind of just, she or the relationship or the connection just wore me down in the course of that. And so the guard went down again. It seems the whole story is about guards going up and guards coming down. And once you can leave your guard down, and go, okay, this is me, this is it. It's less exhausting. It's scary, but in a way, once it's down and it stays down for a while, that's where actual real, well, that's, you know, that vulnerability caper that turns out to be true. That's where real connection happens. Yeah.
And I guess, and that kind of relates to something else I wanted to ask about, that I think, you know, there's so much loss associated with adoption, whether you let that in or not. I mean, I think for you, Robin, there's still a loss there. And I know at one point, Susanna kind of brings that to you in the form of family videos.
Yes.
Because I think she wants you to feel it, because that's the connection, isn't it?
I was a mercenary. I desperately, I need, it sounds terrible. I needed her to feel it. I wanted to get, because it is like, and we kept saying, it's like I'm the Italian and Robin's the German. Like we have very different personality types. And I'm trying to find her inner Italian because I need to feel the importance of the decision, but I need to feel the feeling. I need to know that that I'm not just an intellectual construct, that it's felt. And so I subjected her to the what I thought was the biggest gun I had in my arsenal, which was video of me as a little baby. Yeah.
And as a toddler. And it did work. But me being me, I didn't show it worked at that point. I just sort of was like, I kept, well, the thought that came to me with complete conviction, apart from other weird feelings of being jealous, watching her parents with this toddler saying, but she's mine. I mean, with no right at all to do that. But just the really thing came. I gave away my best thing. I actually gave the thing at that time was the best thing. I gave it away. So, but as I say, I kept it to myself at that point.
See, that would have been helpful at
I
the
know
time.
it would have been helpful, but I didn't. Then I tried to tell you later.
Yes, and then she did try to tell me, but we're going to Lion King or something, and she said it in a busy restaurant, and I didn't quite hear it. So I went, oh, that's good.
And we both missed the moment. Do you know what I mean? First of all, I missed it, and then she missed it but somehow.
And again, I think that's where hopefully the book is helpful, is that it shows people missing the moment. It shows how each person is actually trying to do something, and humans being humans, just we miss moments all the time.
Just kind of
Yeah.
You say at one point, Robin, because I think sometimes when a reunion starts or when we seek out reunion, and maybe not always, because along with adoption trauma comes a lot of protective mechanisms. So it's to be expected, actually, that you protected your heart from feeling that loss or feeling that every day of your life, because that's not be a fun way to live until reunion. And the hope is that, you know, reunion's going to fix this, mend this, make everything okay again. And of course it can't replace the years that were lost. But one thing I really love in the book, Robin, is when you say, but in some other ways, this is non-linear. The connection is non-linear, but it's probably just as real, but you say it's in maybe some ways deeper to other relationships, or to maybe the relationship you have with your other children that you did raise. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on that, or things that have...
Yes. Well, it was a strange thing. Almost I could think, oh, did I really say that? But I did. I know we were looking through photo albums, which proved not to be helpful to either of us in the long run. But and that's like a chronological little snapshots, you know, the life going on in a line, but it doesn't convey the real fullness or complexity of life at all. And I think that the deeper thing, well, there is that blood connection is so deep, no matter what, you know, the circumstances are. But they really are, the pain is real, the losses are real, and they can't be undone in this life. Certainly they're there. But I guess, again, and I do speak as a Christian, there's a great beauty in redemption, is the way I would put it, that things, I believe things can't be, they're not, as you say, cured, to put it another way, but there's a great beauty in, if you have made a big mess of things, that can be forgiven, that there can be loss, but they can be restored. I mean, look at us. This is a miracle. I'm still amazed at the miracle that I got my daughter back. So that is, well, I'd say that the glory of redemption.
Yeah. What about for you, Susanna? Any thoughts on that non-linear way of looking at a relationship, I guess, and what formed with Rob?
I mean, I suppose in another part of the book, we have the metaphor of the dinner party.
Yes.
And so a late life reunion is you're coming like to a dinner party at dessert, and you arrive and all these people, they kind of look like you and they seem nice and they're talking to you and they're very welcoming. But, you know, they've already had 2 courses and they're a bit drunk and there's lots of stuff and you don't get all the in-jokes and things have already gone, but you're joining. And it's hard because you can never go back. You can never go back and catch up. So the challenge is to say, but I get dessert.
Yeah.
And enjoy dessert and enjoy that, because it's like when we looked at the photo albums, they're not really helpful because you can't insert yourself back in there. You don't have it. You know, I have 2 full blood sisters. Would I have loved to grow up with them? Yes, but I can't. And I would never have given up my life sister and brother for that. So it's just a mess. And that's, you know, that's why redemption is really powerful, because the mess, the reconciled, but it's so it doesn't help to be linear. You lose if you look at relationships in a kind of linear way. You lose because you cannot get those years back. So you've only got, you know, what you've got now, and you know, and gratitude for dessert. I mean, who doesn't like dessert? So.
And I think exactly, I love dessert. But I think also, when we've spoken about that previously, it's, well, how many courses of dessert? Because once you get a few years into reunion, you do get to make shared memories.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering what the years have been like since you published the book, and any highlights, and whether anything shifted at all in any way.
You did become a Christian, which you weren't before, and
I think
didn't say that.
I think the highlights are that it's just normal lights as well, you know, and there's been losses and there's been happy things and sad, you know, very sad things as well. But in a way, the highlight is it's no longer exhausting. The exhaustion of trying to reconcile things and wrangle things is has gone. And it can be, it's like you were saying, you know, you're not going to leave. You could have arguments, you could have bad things happen, you can disagree, but you're locked in. And I think for the adoptee, where being locked in is not, it was never a given. And that's why we can be a hypervigilant lot, and we can be, so to just know, oh, I'm home, and I have 2 homes, and I keep saying it's a bit amphibious. You don't know whether you're a land or sea animal, but you're home, and it's actually in the not having highlights, in just being normal, which I think non-adoptees don't get. Normal is very underrated in some ways.
And we have now, of course, built up shorthand of communication. We've got all that. We've got shared in-jokes that only Susanna and I have experienced, and we've got to share a sense of humour, very much click on that sense. So we have mad hysterical occasion, but that's all built now into us. So we can act normally, as Susanna was saying, because we're not,
Yeah. Well, we've almost come to the end, but I want to put you on the spot and ask about ABBA again, and just say,
who doesn't want to do that?
If that was the song, the name of the game was the song for reunion, are there any other songs now for the long haul, for the, you know, that would capture where you're at?
Oh gosh, now I'm gonna be up all night going through the playlist.
You might have to get back to us on that.
I will have to. I mean, I do find there is an ABBA song for everything. But I mean, and that was uncanny how that kind of captured. I mean, Mamma Mia strikes to mind. Mamma Mia was definitely the theme of, because you keep repeating mistakes. I'll have to get back to you on that, Jane, but that will be a delightful way for me to spend my afternoon.
Well, I just want to thank you both so much for being so generous. Like, definitely, I can see that even this process of talking, you know, has made you vulnerable, just like the reunion did, just like the book did. But I think it's so important to share and to normalize for everyone.
Because where we come from and who we are matters. And I think a great deal about in the past how it was handled was, it was saying it doesn't matter. you know, we can just blank it out. We can blacken out your birth certificate. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. And it does matter. And what you do with it is up to you and how you handle it. Yeah, but to know who you are and whose you are matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much again. I've loved speaking to both of you.
Thanks, Jane.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.